So we're going to start with coffee. Starbucks executive chairman Howard Schultz last week spoke to the New York Times, and he said he believes companies can do well and do good. He said a company should and can, quote, achieve the fragile balance between profit, social impact, and a moral obligation to do everything possible to enhance the lives of our employees and the communities we serve. But he went on to say that for such goals to be attainable, sound business practices were essential. He said the price of admission to have a social impact agenda is to have financial performance. So there's a lot to unpack in there, but Bruce, I'm going to start with you. As an educator at a business school, a fine business school, do you think it is a fragile balance? If so, why? Between those things, profit, social impact, and moral obligation.
You know, I think Howard Schultz in the first place is an amazing individual, really a path breaker. And his company does illustrate this ability, of course, success, financial success. You got to step in and rectify things, but overall it's been a fantastic performance. But also some things which just make sense in what consumers want. And consumers want fair trade practices. They want to have employees who are well treated. So for him, in this business, it's a client-facing business with the masses of people. This is something which he can balance. But when you step back on many things, it becomes harder, particularly when you don't have the luxury of having great products and a lot of money, which Starbucks has.
What kind of companies might have a little more of a difficult, or kind of industries?
Pharmaceuticals come to mind as being an obvious area. They have tremendous upfront research costs. They're always a little bit scared about what's going to happen down the line. They've been stuck many times, from the AIDS epidemic over in Africa, from some of the pricing scandals over the past year, where they really have behaved very badly. Mm-hmm. And it's tough for those firms which do well. Some of them are amazing firms. And we've seen some of them step up on some social issues recently. But they don't take often a strong leadership position by which to make the case made. Now, having said that, I know we've got some experts here which will talk to this. They have been very active in CSR. But it's sometimes, it's almost like we've done a lot of things which we could have done better. Here's some CSR things to make it balanced. But it's not really the Howard Schultz model of making the whole thing work as one whole package.
And Pfizer's a sponsor today, too. So.
Susan, from the consulting work you do you find that Mr. Schultz's position is doable, is attainable?
Well, it certainly is with many brands, and we're seeing it more and more today. I believe it's easier for a CEO in today's world than it was 10, 15, 30 years ago, because all of the statistics are saying that millennials want to work for companies that they perceive to be doing the right thing. They want to purchase and patronize from companies. So if you're a business, you're going to be looking at those numbers. So it is less risky. It will always be risky to a certain extent because you do run the risk of obviously alienating some of your customers, but clearly Starbucks, as your example, is doing so much customer research, and it gave them enough to come out in favor of hiring 10,000 refugees at a time when the American public didn't even know the difference between a refugee, a migrant, and an immigrant.
In terms of you said 15, 20 years ago, it made me think, was there a version of this 15, 20 years ago? Did it just have a different name? I can't imagine people just suddenly woke up and became morally aware.
We've called it so many things: shared value, corporate citizenship, CSR. In the end, it's really just good business. But if you look back 15, 20 years ago, it was really from a defensive position or from a regulatory position. And it was, in some cases, I think many in the audience know the word greenwashing, where you would go ahead and, take out an ad like BP saying we're the greenest company in the world to hide maybe bad things that they were doing on the side. And in today's world where everything is transparency, it's a lot harder to hide.
And consumers sniff that out too really easily, right? Like they know it has to pass the smell test.
Right.
And so they'll sniff that out. And if it doesn't pass that smell test, it's not going to succeed. And like Susan said, when it comes to capturing the millennials, they've made very clear that they want to work with, to buy products from companies that are aligned with their values. And if you are not aligned with their values, they're going to go somewhere else. And it's actually for that reason why there used to be this idea that there was a trade-off, that if you were trying to do good, there was an opportunity cost of some kind. What we're finding out now is it's actually the reverse. If you do have these values imbued and you do actually, not just talk the talk but walk the walk, It's actually good for your bottom line.
Well, to that third point that Mr. Schultz made, which is what I wanted to ask you about, Jason, was to have social impact, you have to have financial performance. Is that right?
Right. Well, listen, I mean, it's like any other business where, you know, if you have a great mission but you go broke, what's the point? So, you know, everything about being an entrepreneur is hard. It's even a hard word to spell. You know, it comes to us from the French, which may explain why it's difficult. I don't know, but the whole idea is that none of this is easy. But when you can succeed at it, you can do both at the same time.
Well, and with startups, there used to be a notion that bringing in social good was something that you did after profitability.
Right.
And now when you talk to startup CEOs, they're actually realizing you may be able to get to profitability faster by doing the right thing first.
I want to pick up on something Margaret mentioned. She talked about the events of this summer in Charlottesville as being a catalyst. But I'm wondering from your point of view, was there something else? Was it the 2008-9 crash? Was it the election of President Obama? Was it the election of President Trump? What events do you think have really led us to this place where large corporations, not just the smart startups with young millennials who are excited, are really thinking about this? Bruce, is there some historical event?
I mean, that was an extraordinary event for all kinds of reasons, and it showed certain revelation of moral backbone, both in politics and also in the corporate world. It's hard for business people. We know this because we often ask them to come on campus and talk. It's hard for them to talk publicly about these things. And this was an issue which they did. They really took leadership, and they made a very strong case. And it's hard for them to step off boards and speak against Washington and the highest politicians in the country. So it was an incredible thing to watch. Really a brilliant moment for business, and I think this is something people have been waiting for. But you know, it's almost unfair to say did this hurt the profitability or not because they stepped beyond that. But this is not something really which was a trade-off for them, because it is something which people of some bravery, and these people were brave to speak up, understood that they have patients, or they're going to have customers, or they have employees. And particularly the employee side, which we're living in a multiracial, multi-ethnic world, you can't just let these people feel like there's no caring from the top of the corporation. They have to speak up for it. So I think that was really brave to do that, and also made a lot of good business sense.
So you feel Charlottesville was a turning point?
I think it was an amazing event.
I liken it almost to a perfect storm, where you had a confluence of things. You had millennials growing up being, not millennials, probably even Gen Z, being born within a few months, they're holding an iPhone, right? So they have a window onto the world to see what's happening in Bangladesh and Somalia that I didn't start seeing until I was probably in my 20s, right? Because the news that I saw was 3 white men for 19 minutes, Mondays through Fridays, right? For those of you in the audience of age, you remember that well. And then you had the realization that climate change is real. I mean, that kind of happened. And the notion of social media and transparency. You bring this all together, and it led to us all being much more aware. I will say the current administration was the precipice to really get people motivated.
So you're bringing the internet, the advent of people who are nativist internet users, and their ability to grasp the world.
Yeah, and connectivity, that we're no longer just siloed countries. We're all, the supply chain connects all of us.
Right, actually, this is something I write about in my book. I call it the Great Convergence. So, really, if you look from
I read his book.
Thank you. Now available at Amazon. So, sorry,
$9.99.
My editor's in the room. So, if you look at sort of from 9/11 through even 2009, and then 2009 through today, there's been this great convergence of the world being torn asunder with war, famine, global problems on an unbelievable scale, and at the same time, it's being restitched back together through the advent of social media. And it's that sort of fusion of the two that I think impacted people in ways that they weren't impacted before, and it changed perspective. And that, to me, is the zeitgeist shift. That's the underpinning behind the whole movement.
I want to go back to what you were talking about, the CEOs, the people who stepped down from the President's Economic Council after Charlottesville. It was interesting to read the different statements from the CEOs and the different tone that each one took. For example, Alex Gorski from Johnson & Johnson. He said, Johnson & Johnson has a responsibility to remain engaged as important policy decisions are made. That hasn't changed. The president's most recent statements equating those who are motivated by race-based hate with those who stand up against hatred is unacceptable and has changed our decision to participate. I believe Campbell Soup had a very similar response, the CEO, drilling definitely into the race hatred issue. But it was interesting, the CEO of 3M said, sustainability, diversity, inclusion are my personal values and also fundamental to their 3M vision. He goes on to basically say in a statement, well, this isn't really going to work for us anymore. He doesn't specifically name the issue. Is it important for leaders to get political when they make decisions like this? What do you think?
It's hard. I mean, and I think Alex Dorsey was, again, I think he was tremendous in taking leadership there. And he has a military background. He's a person who's used to taking positions, a little bit of maybe of courage in his gut, which he showed. And it does take courage because business is regulated. Business deals with people who have diverse customers, who have diverse politics. One of the interesting things is that when you look at political giving by top CEOs, corporations don't give as much to Republican or Democrat extremes as individuals do. The individuals might be Republican CEOs, they might be Democrat, but the corporations themselves are choosing the middle road because they don't want to piss off, quite frankly, that larger base, both shareholders and customers. So when they come out and speak, wow, we don't hear it that often. We should hear it more. We should hear it more often. But it's it's something which I think the public is waiting to hear from. And we have such trouble bringing it on campus, but finance should be doing this particularly. And they have never explained well to the public exactly what happened, why you lost your home, how we feel bad about it. And it's been a big issue for them. And I think now it's coming around where they are taking more leadership on these issues.
Susan, how has the role of the modern CEO changed, given all we're talking within this conversation?
Well, again, I think if you look at the statistics, the American public is increasingly wanting companies to take a stand on social issues, okay? And this is a very, very new phenomena. And we liken it to the fact that we've lost faith in some of our traditional institutions, the faith-based institutions, government, even to a certain extent NGOs, which if you look at stats are often not viewed with complete, we don't trust them either. So it's a big void for business to fill, and CEOs and the C-suite very much pay attention to these statistics, and it's a way that they can lead. They can attract the employees that they want to attract, and they can keep them, and they can attract the customers. So I don't think it's being done from a business perspective.
One of the things I think is interesting is people tend to think of this mostly as a left issue, climate change, those kind of things. But you do have, for example, the man who runs, CEO of Chick-fil-A, who will not open on Sunday because of his deep principles that Sunday is the Lord's Day. But how do CEOs navigate politics? That's kind of what I was asking about Bruce, because there are certain issues that are very difficult to talk about.
Well, we've seen business get in front of LGBTQ, we've seen business get in front of climate change, we've seen business get in front of refugees and immigration. But there are two issues, notwithstanding, that have yet to kind of become something that they're talking about, and that's something near and dear to my heart, but it's women's access to reproductive health care, which is fundamentally an economic issue, and gun violence. There was just, I'm so thankful. Carolyn Everson, who's an executive with Facebook, recently pulled together an entire group of marketing executives to actually get together and start developing ways to get people to think twice about guns and what we can all be doing. So that was the first step in seeing the private sector. But women's access, it's like a big silent, but that's next, I predict.
So we've been talking a lot about very established, enormous corporations. Is it more difficult for those kind of businesses and CEOs and leaders to take these positions than someone who's starting from the bottom up and we're just creating it and we're going to bake it in and this is part of our fabric?
Yeah, I mean, the stakes are higher if you have shareholders you have to answer to. So it's always going to be, it's hard to make the elephant dance. An entrepreneur has the ability of starting from the ground floor and saying, hey, this is what I want to do, this is what I believe, and then seeing where it goes. It's harder for a company to do that, but they really have to. And the Charlottesville and the President's Council, I honestly don't know if that was political or just common sense. I mean, it just seemed to me like, are you serious? I mean, it was such a, it's the KKK. I mean, like,
Nazis.
this is not like, to me. There's no gray here, and I thought that I don't think it took a profile in courage to leave the President's Council over that. Mm-hmm. I think that was smart, and if you thought that was risky, then I think you're sort of misreading the tea leaves of America right now.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, a lot of companies are missing it.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about millennials. We've talked about them as consumers, but Bruce, I'm interested in, you have millennials who are now in business school. We think of them young, but that's because we're old. But they're,
Gen Z,
the future leaders.
In business, I still don't know the demarcation line.
I can tell you.
But
I have it here.
It's like 1980,
1982
76.
to,
There's a couple of different.
Right.
But they're entering business schools. Tell me a little bit about how you're teaching them about corporate responsibility and ethics, and what it is they're asking from you as educators.
Right, it's interesting. In fact, we're already just starting the next generation after millennials. So they came through, and it's been a great change for us. We have in the Stanford Bernstein Center, which we have at Columbia Business School, we are responsible for teaching ethics to everyone, and it used to be kind of a pushing the string to have them done it. Still, there's lots of people there, lots of different views. It's a very diverse place politically and in other ways too. But there's a large need where people come up to you now and say, "You need to tell us your view, professor." Now it's just like you're saying, and it's fair because it's like we ask CEOs to stand up and then we teach something. Here you hear different views. And we do that really well. But then they say, "And what do you think?" So it's been interesting to say, well, I guess I got to say something now. So it's been healthy for us to face this demand for more open dialogue and have these things in the public, because it's only through emotional, personal commitments that people believe you. Like you say, that's, people can smell it. It's like you walk into a hotel and they say, if you don't want your towel cleaned, don't throw it on the floor, and then you keep the same sheets for 2 weeks. Do you really think the hotel cares about that? Students are asking us the same thing. They want us to be, the word is authentic on these issues. They want to drink authentic beer. They want to have authentic teaching done as well. And it's
And do they want to start authentic companies? Do they want to run?
Many do.
Do they want to work for authentic companies, or do they want to make money and pay off loans?
I think they're all hoping for that. There are people who are going back into the companies which Susan consults to, which have wonderful programs and CSR programs with lots of outside help. So they want that, so they're hoping for it. But of course, many of them are going out and founding businesses which have that aspect to it. But in these Pew Foundation polls, they love small business. It's just true. That's part of small business. But look at Uber. Uber is not exactly a comforting place in this regard. So students will sort a little bit when it comes down about financial issues, about the wages and will they get paid and the lives which they have. But still, there is this hope that you can do both in the course of the career.
Bruce, I wonder if you see from students that they are sometimes they feel almost guilty about starting a company that does good and makes money.
Yeah.
I saw this a lot when I was researching my book. One social entrepreneur from South Africa said to me, she said, if I created an app that gave me fuzzy eyebrows and I looked really funny in the app and I made $1 billion off of that, everyone would be like, oh, you're amazing, you're so innovative, like what a great concept. But if you did the same app that has social benefit to it and you made $1 billion off of that, people would think that's sort of dubious. Yep. And I think that's a level shift. Yeah, it is changing now, but that's something we have to work on.
I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to go out to the audience. Microphones will be just flagged down my colleague. A writer for the New Republic said about tech, obviously tech's where big money is and where all the next generation of wealth will come from, the tech world does suffer from a certain moral blindness. Do you agree or disagree?
It's interesting because I was just on a panel 2 days ago talking about this whole issue of, what is Facebook and Twitter and Google doing to our children, right? And it's an ethical question, right? Because that's how they're making money. So I do think we're going to be seeing that whole conversation. And obviously, we were talking earlier about the notion of fake news. How much responsibility does the technology companies take? And you're seeing there's advocacy groups See, that's another one of those words.
Yeah.
Say or spell.
Can't blame the French, though.
Yeah. But there's advocacy groups that are now developing that are begging the question from the public and from tech firms. But if you look at the corporate responsibility from technology firms, Microsoft donates, if you look at their employee body as well as the company, more than any other company in the world in terms of providing funding for NGOs.
I mean, I know you do so much in this space, but don't you
really don't.
like Microsoft is an adult company?
Yes,
I mean,
yeah.
that's why it wasn't liked very much. There's too many adults, in the company. But Mark Zuckerberg, who is amazing, has done incredible things, said, regarding the fake news, said, "Hey, we're a tech company. What do you want?"
Yeah.
That's got to be like a nightmare for that corporation. So they have, I think they are a little bit immature in understanding how big they are, and what they just think they're great because they have great innovations which people love, and they need some adults to come by and tell them it's not quite that way. You have to think about other things as well.
But Salesforce was just named in another business magazine as the #1 company to work for in the world, and one of the quotes, literally at the top of why they reached that amazing honor, was from an employee who said, "I love working for Salesforce because I know that Mark Benioff and our company stands for more than just the technology we sell."
Let's go to the audience. We've got a couple minutes.
I'm sorry, I'm talking too much.
Good morning. Thank you for having this program. It's certainly a challenging question, but I'm a little concerned about the painting of such a rosy picture of the morality of this country, given the fact that we're in the wake of an election in 2016, which seems a long time ago, maybe.
It
But
does.
isn't that long? Yeah, it does. But yet, the people in this country that represent the bicoastal viewpoints of morality may not be in coherence with the middle of the country and the rest of the country in the South, and as far as believing that they should be altruistic. And you can see in the government the appointments right out of the corporations, like Pruitt, who was heading the Environmental Protection Agency, an agency
That's crazy.
I worked for years in 1973. And just doesn't seem to jibe with what I see happening. And it would be a nice idea to have it this way, but I wonder whether you've thought about whether or not this is a more pervasive morality or it's a less pervasive morality.
Or perhaps the morality that you're talking about that you may disagree with isn't happening in corporations. Maybe it's happening in churches. Maybe it's happening in different entities that those people trust, as opposed to big corporations.
And it's all the more reason, though, why you need corporations and social entrepreneurs to fill the gap of where government should exist and operate, and they're not, are not going to. Certainly not over the next 3 years. Well, we'll see how long it is, but certainly not over the last, in the administration. It is difficult. You can have an administration like the current one we have, and still have thriving CSR and social entrepreneurship. They're not necessarily, they can coexist, because politics is, and the way we elect our president is an odd thing.
Well, yesterday I was meeting with this.
We have time for one more quick question.
I was just going
Got one more quick question.
Hi, Carol Cohn. I think it's great that, kudos to Atlantic for doing this, and it's great that everybody came out. I'd love you to talk about employees, because we talk consumers, consumers, consumers. I don't call them consumers, I call them citizens. But Howard Schultz, he does what he does because he has this statement. He says, how can I ask my partners, they're not his employees or partners, to advocate for me if I don't advocate for them? So I think what everybody here, if you can take away, obviously this is a correct way to do business, but it has to be strategic. But we all should think about starting at the center with our colleagues and employees. So I'd love for you to comment on that.
Bruce, I'm going to let you, this is your last answer.
Real quick, you're absolutely right. And I think it goes back to what Jason said earlier. It's the employees, like customers, want you to be working for companies which they believe in, are doing the right thing, which is not just greenwashing on that. And
Nielsen just came at 67% of employees want to work for companies
which are better. So they want both on these things. And when they go through a moral crisis at a company, it hurts. Ben Horowitz, or Andreessen Horowitz, who I think is an amazing fellow, says, the hardest thing is to go out there and tell employees you screwed up or you failed. He wasn't talking about investors. That's why he was so interesting. And I think some people got the message that there is, even in venture capital, even in Silicon Valley, even in tech, you have to think about
even
the
in
employees.
Hollywood.
Well, I don't know.
We're going to get to that on another
Can
panel.
I just say one thing to that? Tim Cook made a great statement at the Bloomberg conference several weeks ago. He said, companies should have values because they're made up of people, and people have values. Right. And I think that
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
kind
right.
of captures it.
It's a great place to end. Please thank our panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.